You're listening to Stories from the Field by the Institute for Education Innovation, hosted by me, Doug Roberts. We're back on Stories from the Field, the Superintendent podcast. I'm here with one of our longest serving IAI superintendent members, my friend, Dr. PJ Caposey. How are you, man? Good to see you.
Good to be here, Doug.
Yeah, thanks for coming. We're in your hometown here at the District Leader Connect event in Chicago, and we finally got here. I'm really glad to be here.
Pumped to have a home game. It's nice.
Yeah. So PJ's written several books. He's out there. You can find all of his work out there. I'm just curious, like, how do you balance your own scholarly work, your writing, family? You got 4 kids, right? You're a family man, and you're currently leading 2 school districts. Like, what's this year been like? How are you managing it all?
I hope well, but it for the first time, I would say that I don't usually crave downtime or crave a break, but it'd be nice to have 10 days. I mean, we were just talking about Summer Institute, which is, I don't think I've missed a Summer Institute. I'm like, I don't know, just because at the point where I don't want to commit to anything. So it's been interesting in terms of trying to figure out how to do as many things well as possible. So a lot of the talks that I give are actually on prioritization, time management, et cetera. So I kind of feel like I've put myself to the test on all of those this year.
Yeah.
I think overall it's going okay. I mean, I had to scale down the speaking just because of the travel, which is interesting because those that do the speaking work kind of know it's a momentum work. And so that's the really interesting part, is trying to figure out, and now putting the energy back into regaining the momentum, into getting into other states and other countries and doing that.
Yeah, right. Well, it's you always bring a smile, which I appreciate. So it seems like you're having fun, even though it's been a big year and maybe some downtime coming.
Yeah, I mean, it's been great. Like, everything was of my choosing, right? Like, so I try to keep the mindset of I get to, not I have to, right? And so I get this unique opportunity to lead 2 districts for a year, which was not how we designed it. Like, we had a great, the plan looked awesome on paper, right? And it didn't quite work out, and we're here, and it's a pretty cool opportunity to be able to do this. And it's actually helped me learn a ton about myself and the process too, because last year when it became apparent that I was going to be put into this situation potentially if both boards could agree, which like that's a 60 minutes in itself. Yeah. But I would have told you at that point, I was doing it because the district that I was intending to leave was so good to me for 11 years that it was truly an act of service of trying to hang on for one more year there to make the transition. And while it's still largely true, like, I also now realize 10 months in how ego-driven it was to try to do 2 as well and to prove that I could do it. But I could not have told you that last year in May.
Okay.
So it's been very good learning experience for myself in terms of self-awareness as well.
And just, for people watching this, I don't think most superintendents even understand how you do 2 at once. These places are like somewhat of a drive apart from each other, right?
I mean,
Oregon,
district
Meridian?
office is about 25 miles from each other. It's in Illinois, there's a handful of students that do both, but they're typically an elementary district that shares boundaries with a high school district, and they just combine the resources that way. These are 2 completely different communities. And when I say completely different, I mean completely different,
right?
In terms of makeup, politics, belief systems, et cetera. So it's
so is it like Monday in Meridian, Tuesday in Oregon? So
it's probably more 80-20, and that was kind of the design when we went into it. So Meridian pays me like half of what they would pay in interim. And that was by design, just because I was trying to help them out. So that helps, but there still is a great deal of guilt in not, because I'm not giving it my all. Like, it just would be impossible. So it's pretty much like 4 to 7 a.m. is Meridian. Mm-hmm. The workday is Oregon. And then on Thursdays, I invert it. And then I spend Thursdays there.
That's a lot of work. Wow. Yeah. So we're talking a lot about here at the DLC, but in general, we're talking a lot about mentorship and how we can sort of pay forward the great mentorship that we've received in our careers. Can you talk about some great mentorship that you received and what that looked like and what mentors are doing now? How they're involved in your life?
Yeah. I mean, so my primary professional mentor is Tom Mahoney, who was an II member before he retired. Godfather of my oldest son, has done immense work. He has helped me do immense work on myself in terms of growing as a human being, not just as a professional. When I started to get into the writing and speaking business, it was a foreign language where I knew nobody. Todd Whitaker and Julie Adams kind of tag teamed to be big brother, big sister, and teach me the ropes on that. And so for me, mentorship has always been about humbling myself enough to ask for help. And I've been very fortunate that in my life, very few people have said no, right? In terms of if you go and ask somebody to be a mentor or a coach, I always advise people when I speak not to do that. It's a terrible question to ask someone because everyone feels compelled to say yes. And it's like you're essentially committing to being a free life coach.
Right.
But if you ask them sincere, deep questions about the business or about the profession or about the topic, most people will engage you and most people will support you. And from there, you will either form a true, authentic relationship in which then you do get the friend and mentor for life, or it stays at the level of, you've got someone to call when you need to phone a friend on a particular issue. And so I think I've been very, very fortunate to have, mentors that have turned into friends. But I also have a great deal of mentors that have just stayed mentors in terms of, I know there's a complex issue. I know there's someone that I need to contact with. As I've gotten older and more successful, like the 6 degrees of separation is so true. Like we are, I think most people are 3 phone calls away from whatever the primary decision maker they want is. And I've just not been afraid to use that. I think there's a lot of, you have to humble yourself to ask for help as opposed to struggling through something on your own.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of us, it can be the first option sometimes is just to try to figure it out on your own, especially when you're smart, capable person. Sometimes I don't want to bother other people, right? It's like, who wants to talk to me about my work problems, right? Do you, was there a moment when, whether it was Tom or shout out to Tom, but, or somebody, when someone said, hey, you really should be running things, or did you sort of know that you should be a leader? Like when you got in, when you were a teacher?
Yeah. So when I was a teacher, I was a teacher in Chicago Public Schools, in a really dysfunctional school. So my last year, we had 8 students die violent deaths in a single year. We had 7% of our kids meet standards. So it was just it was like a TV show place. Like I just don't know how to describe it, but it was just like the bad caricature TV shows about schools. And so that's why I got into administration. I ended up in Rockford in a weird twist of fate. But I remember the very first time that I challenged my principal as an assistant principal. And it was more like, I had prepped myself for it, right? Like I knew that I didn't like some of the decisions we're making. I didn't think they were in line with my values, maybe the school's values. And, but it took a couple meetings to muster the courage. And so he brings up something and I'm like, I really, I just disagree on that. He's like, well, what do you think? I'm like, I think we should do it this way. He's like, all right, well, let's do it that way. And in my head, I'm like, oh my gosh, this was so easy. And so then the meeting ends and walking out, he's like, hey, Caposey, why don't you stick around? I'm like, oh no, right? Like here it comes. And I sat down. He's like, you're ready. I'm like, I'm ready for what? And he's like, you're ready for your own building.
Sure.
And that, quite literally changed the trajectory of my career, because at that point, I'm like 5 years as an AP, then principal. Yeah. I'm 9 months into being an AP. I'm 25 years old and someone's telling me I'm ready. And so that literally changed the trajectory of my life because somebody had the courage to say one thing one time.
Yep. Yeah. Sometimes people are surprised when you tell them, and I think everybody suffers from imposter syndrome of one kind or another, but especially when you say you're ready to do something 2 levels above what you're doing now. I've had that experience recently where it's like, no way. So I think that that experience, I'm sure you've also given that experience to others. Like, how are you kind of paying mentorship forward now?
Yeah, well, I always think, so John Maxwell, right? He's kind of the godfather of modern day leadership speak, and my favorite Maxwell quote is, great leaders see more and before. And so I always look at that as like, we can all walk into the same room and the great leaders are going to see it a little bit more context, a little bit more depth, and a little bit quicker than somebody else. And I kind of view that as my job with each one of my staff members. If I can just see them a little bit more than they see for themselves and a little bit deeper, and then help speak that to existence. If I'm doing that for all 250 of my staff members, my district's going to be a heck of a place. And if I do it in great depth for my 17 cabinet members or whatever it happens to be, and they can do it forward. So my view of mentorship is always that, like, I just need to make sure that I'm setting really high floors for performance, right? Like this is the minimum standard we're going to do, but never setting a ceiling on somebody. Because I view as a leader, as soon as we set a ceiling on somebody, then that's exactly what people are going to give us. And it's so ironic to me because we are so good at this in education. So every time we suspend a naughty 16-year-old, we're like, man, Derek, like if you just knew what potential you had, right? But we never talk about 45-year-old cranky social studies teacher that way.
Yeah.
And if we just would take the mental energy to see the 45-year-old cranky social studies teacher the same way we see naughty Derek, I think our schools would be a lot better places.
Wow. Interesting. I think, I was a teacher, but I didn't want to wait out no one came to me and said, you're ready to be a principal. So I was like, I'm going to go someplace where I can go be in leadership faster. And so I went into the private sector, but, so it's been a while since I've worked in that environment day to day, but school districts are very flat organizations. Do you ever think about that?
Yeah, all the time.
Right.
And particularly rural, there's even less in terms of steps that you can take. And I also think on top of it being flat, that the cultures of most schools, and this is to the chagrin of leaders, so this isn't that what we're trying to create, it's much easier to blend in and stay the same than it is to be an outlier all-star that's pushing the status quo. So not only are there not many opportunities for teachers to jump up in terms of actual, hey, you're going to get a promotion in title or money, but even if you're just going to stand out and be an all-star among your peers, that peer pressure to stay the same and blend in is extreme. Right. And so we're fighting a battle on both fronts in order to try to create innovative, thoughtful, creative leaders. And then speaking for rural as well, even if we do this and we create wonderful principals, like for myself, I'll use superintendents for an example. I could get a $200,000 raise by moving 45 miles. Right? I mean, and at the same size district with multiple assistant superintendents when I have none now. Right? So I'm not talking about going to Chicago. I'm talking about a similar, and our principals are the same way. So not only once we are able to create leadership, and ideally it's internal and we build that up, if they rise to a level of success, then they just get recruited to other places and then they have to choose to stay, which some do. And that's incredible. And I feel like I have in my community, or they choose to go to a different challenge, but also a challenge that compensates them in a much more in accordance with their skill and value.
Yeah. The economics are challenging, especially, you facing declining enrollment at all? I mean, are you?
So Illinois has a weird, so we, our county has gone through like cascading declining enrollment. So each district has kind of faced it at a different time. Everyone's kind of stable right now. Mm-hmm. So we're in an okay position that way. And Illinois has got a weird funding mechanism that really doesn't crush you on declining enrollment, which is a whole different podcast. Yeah. It was wonderfully intentioned, but in practice, well, I'll just say like in practice, it is really serving Meridian incredibly well.
Okay.
And it is crushing Oregon. And so I'm living literally both extremes of the same well-intentioned policy. But that the declining enrollment isn't what's crushing us in terms of finance. It's just, even though we have done very well in terms of EAV and property value, it's not keeping up with inflation. And so that's great. Like I'm not bemoaning the fact that we're paying teachers and support staff better, but it just is what it is in terms of the spreadsheet.
Right. Yeah. So, these are interesting times. Are you all talking at the district about kind of, concerns about federal funding lapses, lack of a Department of Education? Like, how are you kind of weathering all this?
So it's a really interesting conversation to have in two districts that are incredibly red.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting thing to navigate in terms of kind of facts only. And this is how it's going to impact things, which makes it really difficult in the time where the facts are really nebulous, right? So like we know that things are happening, but we don't know what the impact of those things or the legality of those things or the reinstatement of those things.
Uncertainty makes people very nervous.
Yes.
Yeah.
So thankfully for both districts, we're under 5% federally funded.
Okay.
So obviously we need that 5%. I mean, 5% is 5%.
Yeah.
But it's also not catastrophic, and we can fit even with the lack of clarity and the uncertainty, we still have 3-4 good years to figure it out. So we're well positioned from a financial standpoint on that. From a directive standpoint and a policy standpoint, Illinois is a really interesting state with this because likely what would happen without federal oversight is that there'd be increased state oversight. And in Illinois, that's a very left-leaning state oversight. So it's interesting to see how it all play out. Right now,
Upset people in your community.
absolutely.
Right.
So it's one of those things where they may be happy in the short term, kind of win the battle, lose the war type of conversation. So I've been pretty quiet on it, to be honest. Like I have thoughts and opinions and hopes, but at the end of the day, it'll be my job to adjust and lead. And whatever happens, it's not going to be as crazy and catastrophic as COVID, and we led through that, so we'll be all right.
Yeah. So I think that's an important message. It's not going to be as crazy and catastrophic as COVID. We were just talking about that in there. Like that was really hard.
Yeah.
And it was kids, you didn't know where kids were, and just everyone was very vulnerable at that time. And yeah, good. That's hopeful.
Yeah. It's I feel like I'm non-positional on it, which is, I feel like where I should be. I'm not sure if it is or not. I do know that I've done enough work to afford myself a large voice in the state, at least. And I struggle on whether I need to be more active or not. Right.
Yeah.
But it is where we're at now.
What are you writing about, thinking about, working on for your next piece?
So I've got two kind of things going in my head. One is here's my 15 leadership truths, and kind of explaining that out in a very easy to consume type of book, which is nice and flowery and whatever else. And the other one is, if public education dies, here's why. And then kind of writing it to hey, like public educators, this is our call to action. Like if this dies, there's a handful of dominoes that I see would fall, of which we're doing very little to intervene at this point.
Yeah.
And so kind of spelling out that story, I think could be instructive, but I think it could be really widely consumed as well. And whenever you sit down to write, you think about getting the story out and the teaching you want to, but also what market niche or gap you're going to fill.
Yeah. Well, keep at it. I hope you'll be able to join us this summer and kind of teach me and others, your process for how you put a book together, how you get one written and published. And I'm glad that next year you just have one. Does each district give you a separate cell phone?
No, and neither district does. Actually, the FOIA laws, like even if they pay for it and you have your own, it's all crossed over anyway. So I just take the risk. I just have one number. I've had one number for about 20 years, and that's it. We'll go with it.
Good. So you just got one number. Yep. That's good. Well, anyway, thanks for being here. Thanks for chatting with me. Thanks for hosting us here in Chicago. It's been a great session.
No problem. Thanks for coming to the hometown, and it's always great to be doing anything with IEI.
Thanks for listening. Subscribe and follow IEI for more stories at ieik12.com/podcast.